Okay, so we're going to have a heap of fun today. We're going to be circling back to Bootstrap, but we're going to be looking at a very common design pattern called a carousel or a slider, right? And the idea, I'll log into this. So if you proceed, I guess I have to make it visible. That's going to be, that's helpful. So you're looking for module. So if you head into the learning modules on the side here, you should see now module 3, design components carousel. So the idea here, we're going to go to, if we go to getbootstrap.com, oops. So if you head over to getbootstrap.com, like we went to, we were working with last week, I'm going to, we're going to delve into some of the pre-built components that you can use to basically speed up the development of these very common interface elements that are so pervasive. So, for example, you head into documentation here, and over here on the far left, you'll see a link called Components. And there's a series of these, and we're gonna leaf through some of the more commonly used ones, and we're going to get a real sense of how to think Bootstrap. You know, because a lot we obviously don't have the time to do an exhaustive pass through this entire framework. But you know, how does the Bootstrap framework, how does it work? How do I quickly and easily add these things without pouring any concrete? So in the such that without hard coding too much and leaving things very flexible, and also building them in a way that they will snap nicely into any look and feel that we have in front of us, because very often you're going to be dealing with you know, a set kind of style guide with certain type of graphical features or color schemes and things like that. And really, we can't make any assumptions about that. These have to work anywhere. We can drop them into any kind of look and feel kind of context. So let's head over into here. You'll see at the bottom, or near the bottom here, carousel. No, near the top of the components list. Carousel. So, what do I mean by a carousel? And here's a very kind of unadorned looking prototype for this. And you can see that there's plenty of functionality here. So these are this gray box with the text that says second slide. This is actually a bitmap. So that's actually a JPEG image. These are real HTML here. So that is actual content, right? So we have the ability to, with the mouse off of the element, there should be a timer that allows at a set interval for those slides to rotate past. A previous and next button, obviously. And also you have indicators here, which allow people to hop. And so this design pattern, we see it everywhere, right? It's very, very pervasive. But the beauty of using a framework like this, if you're to build this by hand, piece by piece, component by component, this will take you a long time. Not only that, you'll be building a lot of these things from scratch. So it's kind of like saying, well, I'm going to build a car. That's great. So let's, first we need wheels. Oh, before we need wheels, we need 4 rubber tires. Okay, let's learn how to vulcanize our own rubber. No. You're going to call up Michelin and say, I need tires. Right? So in much the same way, you can build these things by hand, but that's not the way we do it any longer. All of this, you have all of the skills to build these components bit by bit. If you don't, you certainly will have by the time you've done your stint here. So we'll integrate some of that, some of your HTML, some of your current CSS prowess, and a little bit. We'll even forge ahead into some interesting jQuery stuff today. But this allows you to, like if you're to build this by hand, you're going to go over budget. You're going to take too much time, right? And you have to remember a very big constraint for a lot of the work you're going to do out there is time, right? It's not about building something that's the best. It's building the best thing you can within the time and the money you have to build it. That's the trick, right? If we had endless amounts of time, we could build fantastic things, right? Absolutely, they'd be perfect. They'd be awesome. We don't have that luxury. Very, very, very seldom do you have that luxury. You must be cognizant of time, and time is money, right? So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at, and you can see this usually in each of the, or always in the learning modules. You'll see that I have an introduction to our topic here, and these are the things that we're going to try and learn, or try to achieve. So first, we're going to look at what are the different parts of a typical carousel, or sometimes it's called a slider. What are the components of that from a UI perspective, a user interface perspective? We're going to build and configure out the Bootstrap HTML that gives it semantic structure. So make sure the markup is clean, semantic, easy to navigate, easy for someone else to sit in front of it and make sense of what you did, all that kind of stuff. Then we're going to look at how do we modify the visual appearance of this using CSS in a way that's unobtrusive and we're not making a mess of things, right? How do we do that in kind of the Bootstrap way, which is actually, a collection of best practices. And then finally, we're going to see about extending the interactivity of the carousel by adding on some JavaScript, looking at how we can make it a little bit more interesting and a bit more compelling, and maybe tie it into other functionality that may be present in the application or in the page. So all you'll need today is your handy-dandy code editor. That's it, right? Nothing fancy. So what we'll do is we will, we're gonna follow. I'll bring up the code here. We'll follow along, right? And we're going to have on one browser tab open the Bootstrap documentation for the carousel. On another tab, we'll have open the carousel itself, what we're building, and then we'll have the markup in a code editor. So those are the three things we're going to have open. So I will walk you through. You will follow along to build this out and to in a sense tour the features of this component. And a lot of the kind of way these components are structured and built, and the way the classes are thought out and named, are very consistent through any of the Bootstrap components that are offered. So so walking through one of these components, you'll have a really good idea how to kind of learn how to integrate another one, right? The documentation is so very good that it's really a pleasure to work with. And then what I'll do once we're done, I'm going to issue you a lab challenge, and I'd like you to try and get that done within the confines of the class today. And I'll print these off, and we can actually, if you want, I can mark them on the spot once you're done, and off we go. So that's what we're going to do. So see the lesson files here. If you can right-click on that zip file, save that down to your machine. I'll just put it on my desktop. Put it in a folder for week 3, learning module 3, if you would. Now this time I used the terminal to create a zip archive of today's lesson files. So hopefully that ugly _Mac OS weird direct system directory that trips people up all the time on Windows won't be there. I'm hoping. We'll see in a second. So on Windows, on a Mac, you just double click to extract. On Windows, right click, extract all. A word of caution with zip on Windows, for whatever reason, if you have a machine and wherever you bought it from, they may have preloaded like some third-party compression software like WinZip or 7-Zip or whatever, a lot of times these software packages hijack some of your contextual menus that are natural to the operating system, and they actually take them away. It's really, I find it a really dastardly practice. You know, if I used Windows Day today, which I only use on occasion, that would make me really mad. So if you don't see some of these menus, it could be that you have a third party like WinZip or some. I don't mean to pick on WinZip, but there's other compression software, and they tend to hijack some of this stuff. There we go. So we didn't get the ugly Mac system files. That's good. So you should have a lesson files folder, and inside there, well, I got the .ds store. That won't do any harm. It wasn't supposed to produce those. Cool. So that's what you should have. You should have a CSS directory image. The image directory should contain 5 images. A JavaScript should contain 1 JS folder and an index template. Okay. So that's cool. If you've got all that stuff, that's terrific. So next step is a code editor. If you want, you can use Atom, you can use Sublime, you can use Visual Studio, you can use Visual Studio Code, Dreamweaver, NetBeans. I don't care. Whatever floats your boat. It's cool. Hopefully I can log in here. I think it's. I'm in, for sure. So as a just as a side note, the Apps Anywhere application, if you've got a Windows machine and you install Apps Anywhere and log in with your student credentials, you can run what it does is it allows you to it's basically a cloud service that gives you access to licensed software. So it'll download a certain amount of the software to run it locally, but it gives you access to a lot of the software we have here, just with your student credentials. So you can use stuff, pretty much all the stuff the college has licensed, off campus, anywhere you want. Let's go to. Nice. So we will open up a folder. So whether you're on Atom or Brackets or whatever, open up a folder, which is the lesson files. The lesson files folder. We should have these up here. There's your index page. I'll blow that up a bit. Yikes. Bit large. Is that okay at the back row? Guys, that's okay? Let me know if you want me to bump it up. Also, you may not have to, but I'm going to go to View and toggle the word wrap so the long lines will wrap around. And in our browser, if you could fire up under the getbootstrap.com, you click on documentation, and under the components, pull up the documentation for Carousel. So keep this handy. We're going to be referring to this, and we're going to be clipping code, some amounts of code out of this document as well. So keep this handy. So you've got the Carousel documentation, you've got the index file, the whole folder open up in your code editor. And next thing's next, we will also open up a tab in your browser, whatever one you want. Let me open up Chrome. We'll open it up in Chrome because we're going to use something in the dev tools that I think will be helpful. Not that you can't access it in the other browsers. open up Chrome, Control or Command O will get you the local file button. This is we're not going to be doing anything across a network really. And open up index.html in your page. It should just look like that. Okay. So if you're stuck, feel free to throw up your hand, tap your neighbor on the shoulder. Right? Don't be stuck and stay stuck for for the next little while. Just if something's not working the way it should, this is your chance. Flag me down. We're supposed to break things, right? That's the idea here. You want to break stuff, and that process of something not working and then hunting through, doing that troubleshooting, using those dev tools, trying to find out where the problem is. That's the learning. That's the real value in this, right? It's not if you built everything from start to finish and it was perfect and it worked all the time. I don't know how you learn a single thing, right? I've never been that that lucky to build anything in the first go. So anyway, cool. So I've punched in some numbered steps to help us navigate this. So the first thing, we're going to use a content distribution network to bolt on the CSS for the Bootstrap framework. You can, like I said, like last time, you could download this, you could clone it from the repository and whatever you want. But we're just going to point to the cloud and include it that way. So how to do that? We head over to our Bootstrap, and if you go back home here and say get started, you'll see here copy and paste the link into your head before all other style sheets to load our CSS. So here we can just simply click on the copy to clipboard. Allow access. Yes. Okay. Head over to the code, and right under step 1, paste. That was hard. All right. So one of the things here is in order for the browser not to complain about going cross-domain here, we have some code here that verifies the integrity or the authenticity of this CSS framework. Right? That's going to hopefully prevent most browsers from complaining about going cross-site. File save. Cross-site issues are going to become a greater deal as security begins to continually tighten down. You're going to find yourself from time to time dealing with, when you're pulling resources from a CDN or from another site or another resource, you're going to find from time to time that security does trip you up. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You're just going to need to know how to basically demonstrate to user agents that you don't intend to do anything wrong, right? So once you save that, if you go over to the page, where is it here? And if that's successful, when you reload that page, you should get that Bootstrap. You'll know Bootstrap is being applied, the framework, because the typeface changes. Right? So you're going to get the default typefaces for Bootstrap. The opinionated defaults is what they call them. Right? So make sure that works. If that does not work, make sure you've saved this. Right? Make sure if you another common gotcha here is sometimes people try and copy this, but there may be more code off to the side. Right? So sometimes you only copy a little bit of it. I've seen that happen before. So use the little utility they have here to copy it to your clipboard. And we'll go back to the we'll stay here at the getting started here. Cool, step 1. Step 2. Now we're ready to go. So what we're going to do is build a fluid or fixed width container for, like we did last time, for the entire widget. Okay. So we can use a div for this. That's fine. Div, and the class equal container. So you can use container or container fluid. Right? Fluid will be the full width of the page. The container will put a horizontally centered box in the page that will respond to those media query breakpoints. So ultra small devices, small, medium, large, and TVs or whatever. So that's already baked in. That's great. So we've got a class equal container. We'll go all the way down here to the bottom, right around about line 32. Just before you see that text that says optional JavaScript, we'll close the div here. And what you won't see in the, or what you don't see in the code examples in Bootstrap is when they use you'll see that they use a whole heap of divs, and the only reason they do that is because they're not making any assumptions about your markup. They don't know for what purpose you're going to be using this, right? So they can't make any semantic decisions for you. So they use divs because they have no meaning. It's up to you to swap out those divs with sections and figures and fig captions and asides and all this kind of thing, right? You're the one who is responsible for making that markup more rich and more meaningful. That's your job, right? But because we're just going to use a div here, so we said end, is it a class? Is it a class? Yeah, it's class container. Just so we have a reference for that. Bless you. That's cool. And if we reload the page, you'll see this jumps over. If that's working, you'll see this jump over to the side. So this is there's now a box here. You can right-click on the page and hit Inspect in Chrome. And now you can go into the body, and if you click on the div, you can see that container there. So there's the blue is the content, the green is the padding, the border is zero border, and the orange is the margins of that box. Cool. Step 3. Build out your basic page level container. So inside that, like even though we're using a really cool pre-built container, we're still responsible for that crafting this template so it is awesome, right? So we have a page level header. And I'll put the H1 inside the page level header. So lines 19 to 21 should look like that. Watch your formatting, right? Pretty much all code editors, if they're not by default, have the ability to render these vertical grid lines. I like that on code it's turned on by default. I think that encourages good habits. So after the header, we'll add a main for the main page body. Whoops. And we'll end the main just here after step 10. That's weird. So it's one tab stop in from the parent, which is that div. And I'm going to be looking for this in your code. I'm going to be looking for, I don't care whether you use tab stops to indent your code. I don't care whether you use 2 spaces or 4 spaces. I want to see it consistent, and I want to see it clean, neat, and tidy. Right? This is your code. You're building it. You should be proud of it. You're going to be handing this off to someone else. Right? One day you'll be handing a snippet of your own code off to a potential employer. Right? Just imagine you're doing that when you're crafting this. A lot of server-side programmers, and they could be forgiven for this, often are charged with building very sloppy front-end code, right? Because that's not their focus, right? But if you're on a team and you're the front-end developer, you're going to be working with the people, and to some degree maybe working on the back-end resources. You should demand from the people working on the server good markup. And give them the gears. If they give you sloppy markup, say, what the heck is that? I can't work with that. Fix that. Educate them, right? Tell them, why a sea of divs with no comments is no good. They'll appreciate that once you explain it. And finally, okay, after the main, then we're going to have a page level footer. I love these. I love when you're using semantic elements, HTML5 sectioning elements, because I don't need to put this kind of stuff. Right? It's pretty self-explanatory, unless you're, I don't know, use common sense. Save that up. Will that change the rendering of the page that much? I don't think so. But it sets the stage. Cool. Okay, so inside the main here, we're going to be copying the example code from the Bootstrap documentation. So we're going to use the handy copy button to the right of the code example panel. So where are we going to go? We're going to go here, over to, whoops, I've got an IE. Bootstrap, go to components on the left, carousel. And we're going to, you can see here there's a block of code just under the slides only heading, so not far from the top of the page. Right? Go ahead and hit copy. Back to our code editor, so under step 4, most code editors, if you hold down Shift and hit the down cursor key when you're in the left margin, right? If you need to move over a whole block of code, you can do that and then hit the Tab key. In this case, this div is a child of the main, so it should be tabbed in like that. You can do it line by line, but I don't know. It sounds like pain to me. So this is fine, but like I said, the code is generic. It doesn't make any assumptions in terms of your what you're going to do with it, right? So we're going to change the ID. This is an example for the code carousel examples for slides only. We're going to change this to carousel cars with an S. And this is where you can really trip yourself up. If you misspell carousel in here, or you forget to put the S, or you're inconsistent with the S, your CSS is going to be a whole heap of fun. Your JavaScript is going to be a whole heap of fun, right? We're going to use this ID in the JavaScript for sure to grab this particular element on the page, and also with our CSS. So make sure you replace the ID with your own. This div element needs to have, this is the magic happens here, the class equal carousel. That allows the CSS, the baked-in CSS and the JavaScript to work its magic. If you remove that class, no go. You'll just get a series of divs with a bunch of text. Okay. So that's cool. So next is we have a div for the whole thing. And then we have an inner wrapper called a carousel inner. I suppose you could use a section element for that. I'm going to leave that just as a div. But here you can see I've got a bunch of divs that are closed out. Let's match these up with comments. So this one here is the carousel cars. So you can refer to the ID up here, or you can refer to the class when you're writing a comment here. I'll say ID carousel cars. This one here is here for the carousel inner, the inner wrapper. Dot carousel. Yeah. You'll see also by copying this code, some of the formatting didn't translate. So this whole block in here, everything inside the div carousel inner should be dropped in one more stop. Now the other interesting thing here, actually we could probably add the placeholder image before we do the slide caption. What I've got here, if you think about this semantically, I've got a series. If you imagine your mind's eye this slider, right? You have some content that appears. It slides out of the way. For you guys, it would slide this way. You have another piece of content. That content's going to include a big, bright, beautiful image and some sort of text, right? If you think about some of the generic elements that you could use in HTML5, that lends itself very well to the figure element, which usually includes an image of some sort and a caption, right? So instead of just taking this markup as it is from the tutorial or from the documentation at Bootstrap, let's begin to make this better. So in this case here, we have 3 slides. Each one of these these elements with the class carousel-item are 1 slide. So there are 3 slides on this example code. Each one of those, I would argue, could be changed into a figure. So go ahead and change already I have code that's way more friendly visually. Like it's just, when you just got a mess of endlessly and hopelessly nested div elements, it's just really hard to wrap your mind around. You're constantly spending mental energy trying to figure out what part is nested inside of what component and what class and ID does this have, and God, right? This results in things like coffee abuse, right? That's no good, right? You really have to write friendlier code. It's going to make easier CSS, and it's going to make for easier JavaScript. If you have cleaner, simpler, more semantic markup. I know I keep going on about this, but it really, really does make a difference. And I really don't see, I see a lot of examples in production web applications where the markup just could be better. It could be way better, way simpler, right? And as a result, their CSS is more complex and harder to read and so on and so forth. It's not wrong, it's just, it could be better. So that's cool. Inside each of these here, each of these figures, we have an image, but the figure element has an image and a caption, right? So underneath each of these images, so for example, for the first slide here, let's create a fig caption element. And the caption, the fig caption, you can put paragraphs in there, you can put lists, you can put headings, you can put all kinds of stuff in there, right? All we're going to do is we're going to put a heading and a little bit of text in a paragraph. So we're going to put an H-level, H2, we'll say slide 1, and then we'll put a paragraph. Oh, I've made a mess of my code. I broke it. Oh, I didn't close it. Yep. Many thanks. Okay. And we're going to say, for this one, this is just a short snippet of text. So there is 1 slide in the carousel. That is all the markup that comprises 1 slide. So that is repeated for however many slides you would like. Just hammer them in there. Right? What we're going to do also here, obviously we need something in the source attribute or the image isn't going to work. We're going to use a placeholder service. So there's a great web service called Placeholder, and you can just, their API is very, very simple. You simply pass it in a URL which contains the height and width of the image that you like, and it generates a bitmap on the fly and serves it up from their server. It's great. It's great, particularly for prototyping, because a lot of times when you're building functional prototypes, you don't want people to get all hung up on like, that's the wrong photo. Where'd you get that? That's a stock image. We don't have the rights to that picture. Just put in a placeholder, it's a gray image, and then nobody gets all bent out of shape. Okay, so the way this one works down here, So in this case, I want a 1200 by 400 placeholder. And there's all kinds of other ways you can engage the API at placeholder.com. You can put little bits of text in the, I don't know, I think you can change the color and things. You know, go nuts. So place that in the source element attribute there. Oops. Do it for all three of them, actually. One. So, figure, class equal carousel item. Yeah, the fact that I swapped this div out for a figure, all you need is a block level element. An element that can be assigned height and width and margin and padding and all that good stuff. That's all you need. As long as it's a block, you know, don't use a span, or unless you set display block to the span. Use any block level element will do. Swap out that div with something more meaningful. So our second slide, our carousel item, will of course also need a figure caption after the image. A fig caption. We'll need an H2, slide 2. Whatever you want. And the same thing for the third one. After the, oops, oh no. After the third image, and H2. Save that. Let's go and take a look at the result. That's what you should see. Okay. Nothing quite yet. We haven't bolted on any JavaScript. We've got our first slide. So that is sent to us by via placeholder.com. There's your whole figure, and there's your fig caption with the H2. So that's good. Now, probably now that you've kind of crunched a bit of code, probably a really good idea to check yourself for syntax problems. I'm actually surprised. I thought I'd have something. Check your HTML, right? If we're going to start applying some of this custom CSS and this custom JavaScript, and we have broken HTML, you know, we can fix our JS and our CSS till the cows come home. But it won't work unless the HTML is right. So track down any errors. And again, fix one thing at a time. So if I break, this one element here, this fig caption, I forget to close that out, that'll probably generate a whole pile of different so I made one mistake and it generated 3 errors and 1 warning, right? Fix the first one, right? Missing angle immediately before, line 29, column 9, line 29, column 9. So it's saying you can't have this before, well, you've still got a tag open, meaning tidy that up. And then solving that one problem. So solve the one error on the validator, go back, and likely a lot of those other problems will be gonzo. Off you go. Okay, so once we've done that, I actually forgot to write at the outset here. I forgot I attached the CSS, but I did not attach the Bootstrap JS libraries at the bottom of the page. So we'll do that, and that should get the basic functionality going for our slider, because it's all tied to those classes, right? So let's attach the Bootstrap JS libraries. We'll head over here, back to our Bootstrap documentation. We head over to the Getting Started, and you'll see the second block down here. Add our optional JavaScript plugins, jQuery and popper.js near the end of your pages, right below the closing end of body tag. Right? Be sure to place jQuery and popper.js first, as our JavaScript plugins depend on them. So when you're building in code libraries, you put the libraries in first, and then your own custom JavaScript or any of the other things. So there is an order. There is an order to all that madness. So go ahead and hit the copy to your clipboard, and then back here, all the way to the bottom of the page, right? You'll see a little, just before we close the div, you'll say optional JavaScript, jQuery first, then popper.js, then Bootstrap. Go ahead and paste it right there. You can type that by hand if you want. Fill your boots. Knock yourself out. Sometimes you have to type code yourself. Sometimes it's a better idea to use the tools that the documentation offers you. Save that. If everything's cool, you've got valid HTML, the classes are built properly in these 3 slides up here, inside the div with the class carousel. That's the magic there. If these are built properly, we should have a reasonably functional slider. And I don't.
Give it time.
I broke something. So now I go into the inspect here. We can go into our console. Oh, there we go. There we go. There's a little bit of a lag there. I'm impatient. Guilty as charged. There we go. Slide 1. Slide 2. Very cool. So if you've got that, if you've got some animation happening there, you're good to go. You've earned yourself a coffee break. Well done. Pat on the back. We'll come back and we'll start to make this look awesome. So. Yeah.
Do you know?
All right. So to take a look at this, not this. So it's functional. It's not pretty. It's not elegant. So we're going to make this better to show you, to give you some idea of how class-driven these visual styles are. The CSS and the Bootstrap is. For example, we see this the caption here. That's going to stop because I've got focus on it. It slides off. It's not even sitting on top of the image, right? So if we go back here to our markup, and for each of these fig caption elements here, we have to add, this is a class equal carousel dash caption. So watch your spelling. Just because it's a fig caption inside the figure, inside the figure with the class carousel item, doesn't mean this will function as a caption within the context of a slider. You actually have to add that class that's baked into that component. So I'll save that one and watch our first slide. For example, I'll refresh that. There's slide 1, where it should be, inside the, and there's slide 2, not where it should be, right? So what that does, by adding that, they position it absolute, give it a Z index that sits on top of the picture, and then it sits there. So if you go down to each of those big captions and add it to your fig caption times 3. What's your spelling of carousel? If you spell it wrong, it just nothing will happen. And already we have a better looking user interface, right? But still far from ready. So let's go ahead and do some other stuff here. Next step is right here. We've got a caption. We have a placeholder image. We've already got a third slide, so we don't need to do that. We're going to point the image elements to photos of the cards provided in the image directory. So in the image directory, I already have for you 5 different cards. We're just going to use the first 3 here, right? So there's the first one, the second one, the third one. These were all sourced from Flickr.com, and when you search for Flickr images, there's a really neat thing. It says any license. You can check it, and you can pull down, license for commercial, non-commercial use, Creative Commons, and they'll give you the terms under which you can download and use those images, right? So don't just swipe things off Google Images. Make sure that you have the permissions to use the image, particularly if it's in a commercial capacity. You don't want to get someone in trouble, right? And really all it comes down to is attribution. So at the very bottom, I've given credit to all of these photographers who provided these on Flickr, right? So just give credit where it's due. So we'll go back here. So it's car1, car2, and car3.jpg, or what we're going to bolt in here. So head into the, instead of the placeholder, the relative path from here is img/car1.jpg. This one is car2. And car3. I mean, quality photography really makes a difference, even to a relatively unadorned interface. Already, that just elevates that presentation. Always use professional quality photography. Always. Don't use amateur stuff. Don't use stuff nabbed off a cell phone. Right? Even if you're doing just something for yourself and something, I don't know, maybe a side project that you're going to show on your CV. If you can't take the photograph, you're not a photographer. I'm a dangerous photographer, so I know enough to wreak a lot of photographic damage. So, but if I really need a good picture, either hire someone to do it, hire a photographer, talk to people in the digital photography program here. They're more than willing maybe to trade for services if you need some photography work done. Get a professional to give you the images, right? It really makes a huge difference. Okay, so now that we've got those plugged in, now we want some next and previous icons. All right, so next and previous icons. Let's go over here to, we'll head over here to our introduction, or head over here to, where's my components? carousel, and you can scream down here to with controls. So how they bolt the controls on, and you might want to nab this with your, they add a couple of anchor elements after. So here's your slides. Right, they've only got two here. So here's your slides. You've got a couple of anchor elements with some very precise classes on them, and inside that anchor is the text previous. This is for screen readers. So that's for accessibility. It actually doesn't show the word previous or next. And then it shows that it uses one of the icons that are built into the Bootstrap class, the little arrows, the chevrons that go point left to right. Area hidden, so for accessibility, if you're using some sort of verbal kind of representation of the interface, these chevrons are hidden and the text is shown. Bless you. So copy this code here. So you go down to the with controls section of the carousel documentation. So if you scroll down, and don't copy the whole thing. Just grab the anchor here where it says a class equal carousel control prev, all the way down to the end of the anchor here, and copy that. We'll inject that into our code. So we go after. I got to make sure I get this right here. After the carousel inner is closed. Before the last div, exactly. So it has to be inside the big div, which controls the carousel, the whole thing. And we'll see how our formatting plays out. That's not too bad. Clean it up a bit. Tidy up your code. It never comes over quite the way it should. You'll see you can make a lot more sense of your code once you clean that up. Oh, this is a sibling element. This one is there. So now I can see, and put some helpful commenting in there. Prev and next buttons. Oops. I messed up my syntax. Here we go. So that whole widget, those two anchor elements, is inside the granddaddy div, what I'll call it, with the ID for the div, but after we close out the carousel inner wrapper div. Okay? Make sure that's the case. Be very careful when you're bolting this on. Otherwise, your CSS is going to be all over the place. Save this up. So let's take a look at the result. And there you go. And there's a little bit of a subtle drop shadow on it. It's very subtle. It's transparent, so they're using some sort of opacity setting on that, or RGB alpha setting. And mine's not working. I've broken something. Oh, I know it broke. I know it broke. So the href here, you'll see there's two hypertext references. And this is the danger in swiping code off of a documentation or a tutorial and then just jamming it into your code and saying, oh yeah, this will work, I'll just drop it in here. Yeah, no. Never. It never works. Okay? So this href has to point to the ID of the div itself. That ID is carousel cars, right? So the div, we name that thing up here, ID carousel cars. It needs to point to that. So we need a local, and this is, it's a good idea, even if, you know, because if it doesn't work, it won't take you off the page. So we say carousel-cars for the href. And the second one, same thing. that should resolve the issue. So you might be wondering, wow, how come I don't see previous and next in these span? There's text here. This is a class here that's baked into the boot class framework, the screen reader only. So this is great. So if you put this in here, and it's being the interface is being read aloud, so each of those slides are being read aloud audibly, it'll say, go next, previous, and then the person will select that. And it's display none in the visual context, right? And the opposite is true of these little next icons. They're hidden in a screen reader context. That's awesome. All right, so let's make this look even better. So now we're going to add another user interface widget, which is a little bit of a wayfinding control. Because if you look at this slide, I know there's 3 slides. I built it. But what if, the person lands on this page and they're like, things are going by and they're like, oh, I saw one I really liked, and they're waiting and they're like, how long do I have to wait till it comes back? I saw there's a picture there, something that I wanted to, So you need to kind of give them a X of Y kind of idea. You are here, right? So we can do that very simply, and they've got a really elegant, they've upgraded this from Bootstrap, even from the version 4 alpha in version 4 now. They've got it looks really, really nice, and I'll show you how to put it together. So we'll head over back to our, I've got this here in our indicators. So here's what the indicators look like. And this is great. I mean, not only that, they've used some semantic markup here. Instead of a div, they've used an ordered list. That totally makes sense, right? There's an ordered list of slides. So I really like what they've done here. They've used an OL element with some list items. Right? So copy that OL. This is from the boot. So you have to scroll down to the with indicators part of the carousel. So the third code example. Just copy the OL at the top there. I just want that. We're going to have to change it a bit, but there's no sense in typing all that. That's crazy. Now this doesn't go to the bottom. This goes near the top of the code block. This goes right after the primary div. So right after we finish this one, right, we'll put this here. And if you hold Shift, if you've got a bunch of code that you need to shift over to the left, if you can highlight it, and you can hold the Shift button and hit Tab. That'll bump it back. So I can hold down Shift, grab these, and then go Shift Tab to bring them back like that. So there is the ordered list. Whoops. Injected just after we open the initial div. Now, a lot of this functionality is also driven by the data target attributes here. And so those are associated with some of those JavaScript. So some of the JavaScript, like the plugins that offer this kind of functionality in cooperation with some of the CSS, this will allow for some of that linking, for example. Like this isn't a link, it's just a list item, but it will provide some functionality. So what we need to do here is we need to point those to the ID for this up here. So in the same way, so change this out. So change all of those data target attributes to refer to the div that is this slider. And also here, the slides are listed. They're an array, right? So the first slide 1 is 0. Slide 2 is 1. Slide 3 is 2. right? So you want to add more of these here, these indicators. You have to make sure that you're pointing to the array element of the slide, not the number, not the third slide. The third slide would be 2. Let's see what that looks like. Nope, not here. So very subtle, very unobtrusive, but it adds just a little bit more usability and wayfinding to the widget. Very nice. And it gets out of the way, it doesn't obscure the photograph like those big ugly dots that sometimes you have, right? Like, they're like those, you know, nicely done. Doesn't mean you can't change them this way. Right? Bootstrap, you can do whatever you want. If you want to override the CSS, go nuts. Whatever. But this comes right out of the box, looks pretty good. Okay, so we're getting somewhere now. Okay, so now, what if we are not entirely happy with some of the layout? So maybe we like this, and it's more appropriate, perhaps, given the photographs that I have, that this caption here is up here at the top rather than down at the bottom. But what if I don't want to just use it exactly as it kind of shows up, right? No problem. So this is where we can cascade or trump the existing CSS values. So, but first, let's get an idea of what the CSS is that powers the positioning of this element here. So I need to know, if I'm going to write a CSS rule to beat this one, I need to know what rule to, I may have to write a more specific selector. So I need to know what that selector looks like. So we'll go ahead and we'll highlight this. And if you're in Chrome and you right-click that and hit Inspect, we want to mouse over to the Fig class. Oh, I guess we have to wait until it's back at slide 1. Go back to slide 1. Where's my slide 1? Here it is. Okay. Oh, good. It took off. Come back. So mouse over or click on the Fig caption under the elements. So you see it under here, the elements selection. So this is where we can munch through the document object model. So we've got this here. And then we can see down here in the styles panel that the element with the class carousel caption is set to the bottom 20 pixels, position absolute from its next position ancestor, which is probably the box which contains the photograph, right? It's 20 pixels from the bottom. Right? I can overwrite that and say, well, why don't you write it put it from the top instead of the bottom. So I can write a rule in CSS that says class carousel caption top 0. Right? We can deselect that, and you can see. You see, if I deselect it and get rid of the rule, you'll see that's indeed how that is positioned. Right? That's what those little check boxes do. So let's go ahead and set the carousel item, carousel caption. I'm sorry, figure class carousel caption. You have to be very specific, and we're going to set it to the top 0. So I'm going to set it to the top of its parent 0 instead. Where do I put that? Well, let's go over here and so we're changing the position of the caption. So we'll go to step 11 above. So scroll up to the code, way up to the top. Step 11, link to your custom styles. Open the CSS file in your code editor. So the custom styles, look at our code. Here's the custom CSS right here. So from here, we point to that directory locally. Make sure it's after the primary CSS for Bootstrap, right? Excuse me. That's cool. So now let's take a look at custom.css. So I've already put in a few things in here, which we'll talk about maybe a little later. But right here, we're going to go to step 12. Using your browser's DOM inspector. Oh, I guess I need to turn on the word wrap. Using the browser's DOM inspector, figure out how the default carousel caption is positioned with CSS and change it. We know it's with the bottom property, so we say class carousel dash caption. And we'll say, instead of the bottom, we'll override that and say top, from the top, 0. And since this CSS comes after the linked CSS, the Bootstrap, this is later in the cascade. This should win. There's not a really that selector wasn't particularly specific. So it should just be later in the order, and I should win the specificity war. Let's see. And there it is. Now it's at the top. And if I pick that out here, and you can see now, I click that big caption class carousel on the elements, and look now. This one wins. Here it is, carousel caption, bottom 20 pixels. For this one, trumped it. Overrode it. Nice. All right, so now we've seen the result. Let's head back to index.html. Cool. Where are we at? Step 14. Where did I stash step 14? Use custom JavaScript to control the carousel. So we need to attach JS / custom.js to this page. So you can see under here, there's the JS folder. There's my custom.js. We need to attach that to the page. So I'll tuck this in here. So I've got, just be mindful of all of the other JavaScript stuff. We've got our jQuery first. We have popper.js, bootstrap.javascript for all the Bootstrap functionality. And then once those are bolted on, then we can link our own script source equal JS / custom.js. Really, so much of this, at first glance it looks very complicated. So much of this is really just about reading the instructions. It's about going to the documentation and just, particularly with well-documented software, like Bootstrap, it just comes down to just being patient and reading it. I love it. SpaceX is the barge that they sail out, they drive out. It's a drone. They fly it. They drive this boat out to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And they drop this rocket on there, and it says on it, just read the instructions, right? They land a rocket up there from who knows how high in the sky, right? It's awesome. It's true, right? So much of these things that are amazing technologically just comes down to really taking the time to follow simple instructions, and everything just kind of works, right? Okay, so now we have our own JavaScript attached there. So the cool thing about this component is, yes, it's controlled by classes. It's controlled by some of those other data classes. But you can also use JavaScript to pass it instructions and do some other things if you wish. So let me just go here to so our data attributes, right? We can punch in things like how long the interval is between the slides, and so on and so forth. So if I'm up here, data is slide, data. carousel slide, I can add a data attribute there that controls how long each slide pauses before it animates over, or I can use some script to do that. So let's use the JavaScript. No, I guess I have to open up JS. Custom.js. Oh, that looks bad. Warning. It's all right. I'll get by. Call it the carousel using the ID, and use the carousel method to, where's my handy dandy word route? There we go. To create the options object. So we actually have to create an object in JavaScript, attach that object, associate it with the carousel in the document object model with the ID, and then we can issue it a number of commands. So this is what that will look like. Let's go back out to so right here you can copy. So here we see methods. So we can say the carousel is in jQuery, that is the wrapped set. So that actually points to the carousel object, and this here .carousel is creates is a property of that object, the interval. So copy this to the clipboard. So this here in jQuery is called the wrapped set. So inside here, we put a CSS selector. So we're looking for anything with the class carousel. If you have multiple carousels on the page, this will affect all of them. So if you only want to affect one of them, you would put maybe the ID, the specific ID for that one carousel, if you have more than one on the page. So be aware. So in this case, we're just using class carousel. So here, that attaches to this. So this div, this entire thing, has the class carousel. And then we use the method carousel, and inside that is a number of different properties. So in this case, we have the interval, changing this now, change this to, say, 1,000. So this is in milliseconds. I think the default is 5,000, which is 5 seconds. So save that up, and if everything's working the way it should, and it's crazy. You can see the JavaScript rewriting the DOM there on the fly. That's really cool. I always like to see when it's doing that.
That's neat. I also noticed that if you hover over the slide, that it actually pauses it.
Yes, that's baked right into the component itself. You can turn that off, yeah, if you want. The other thing that is baked into the element is if you use the right or left arrow buttons, if you mouse off of the widget, you can use the right and left. Well, maybe I have to reduce the timing a little bit. So let's change this to 3,000. Go to 3 seconds. And if you can use the, no, I guess I can't. That's interesting. Does it have to have focus? Oh yeah, there we go. So you can use the arrows if it has focus. So if you click on it, and then you use the left or right, or you have to mouse off of it, and then use the right and left. No. Not sure how I get the focus off of it. Yep.
How about touch screen, like if we do this on mobile?
Yep.
How do you do that? Just tap because my laptop is touch screen too, so I try to do it.
So the you mean the swipe event is not working? I don't know about swipe events, but that's a good quality question. So how do we tie swipe events into, because that's much different than in a desktop context or a laptop. You're right. Yeah, and that's something that we need to learn to begin to be a bit more versed in is those events that are specific to physical contact on the screen with a fingertip rather than a mouse pointer. I don't know. But you know, I'll look into that and see if they have any touch events that we could, without building them ourselves, or maybe you can just use the object to add that kind of thing in. That's a really good question.
Otherwise, touch is working like if you touch the arrows, it's working.
Yeah.
But,
Hold on. Touch screen as well up here, right? So yeah, but slide. I don't know if a desktop even builds in things like slide. I don't know. That's a good question. That's a really well thought out question. I like that. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. So we changed the interval to whatever we want. Now what is really, really interesting is the whole thing, the whole element, as events are happening, it is firing things that we can bind other events to. For example, when the slide begins moving to the next slide, there's an event that it's called, is it called slide? The slide event is fired when the slide first begins moving. When it stops and finishes and renders the next slide, that's called the slid event, past tense. So there's two events that we can bind to this crazy thing and do interesting things with them. So what I want to try is, now maybe this, I'm not sure whether you would do this in a real world sense, but you might. So for example, imagine if when I hit this and we slide to the next slide, as soon as that slide moves into place, this caption zooms in and then zooms out, right? Drawing the user's attention to it. So not only if the sliding in a fresh image wasn't enough, we're going to hit them over the head with it, right? Not that you should always do that, but I want to show you that you can. It's always the elements or the components always listening for a series of different either user initiated or timed events, right? So this is how this might look. So down here under step 17, first we need the wrap. We need to talk about the wrapped set. So we're going to talk about the carousel dash cars, and you have to. So that speaks specifically to that div, the whole slider. Okay. Now, so this is jQuery. So then we're going to say dot on. So now we're binding an event here to this thing. On, and this is their own event called slide, and you got to watch your typing here. Slide dot bs Bootstrap, in case you were wondering. Carousel. Okay, so that on that event, right, we can do comma the following anonymous function. So we don't have anything there, and then we open up a curly brace. Watch your braces. So here's the wrap set. So this identifies the div. On this event, in quotes, and still inside the on method here, right? Comma, an anonymous function to which we're passing nothing in this case. Open up the curly brace. So this is everything in here is what we do when it begins sliding. Right? This is the idea. And so what we should do when we do this, we'll put a little comment in here. Remove class that zooms caption. always explain what you're doing in code, in comments, particularly when you get into fairly long strings of JavaScript or jQuery. Both. Okay? So now we need to talk about, and we'll use the jQuery wrap set here. You could also use query selector in JavaScript. You don't need to use jQuery, which I'm getting more comfortable with, which is cool. So anything with the class carousel-caption dot remove capital class, zoom it. What the heck are we doing? This will be it'll be clear why I'm removing this class after I build in the second event, which is when it's finished sliding, called the slid. Then I add the class. So the class zoom it is already, I put this in here for here. Zoom it, we add this class. This class, when you add it to the, so you go back here, when we add it to the element with the class carousel caption, so you have to kind of refer back and forth. So this here refers to carousel, this whole thing here, the carousel caption, which is that piece of text, right? So that refers to that. And so we want to remove the class zoom it. I made up zoom it. The class zoom it says attaches an animation, which is zoom in, zoom out over 0.5 seconds. I won't get into the keyframes animation here. Suffice it to say that this, anything when we add the class zoom it, basically adds an animation that scales it 1.4 times and then scales it back over 0.5 seconds. Okay? We'll circle back. We'll be doing some pretty involved animation stuff later in this class, but I didn't want to get into that. So all I'm doing is adding or removing this zoom it class, which has attached to it this cool zoom in, zoom out animation. So there it is. That's cool. So what we can do is we can copy this whole block here. Instead of paste it again, and then here's the difference. Instead of, now we need to do, it's not slide, it's slid. So the other event is slid. That means it's done sliding. So we change this to slid here, function, and then we say we're going to add a class that zooms caption. So in this case, we change it to add class. So I have to have the, when it begins to slide, I have to remove the class. Otherwise, it's going to be going all over the place. I have to take that zoomer out and zoom it class off, and then when it finishes, zoom it out, and then it only animates once. So everything's cool. If everything's the way I wanted it to be. There we go. Subtle. Well, I don't know, maybe that's a bit obnoxious, but it's fun. It certainly draws your attention to it. But, and you can just leave it on timer. You don't have to. So that event, that slid.bs.carousel event is firing at the beginning of the slide being advanced, and when it finishes advancing. You know, more practical applications of this, I don't know. Maybe if you're building a slider or carousel for I don't know, for a front end for a Shopify site, and you want to slide over this really cool deal, and when it finishes sliding over this particular deal, maybe you want to slide down a little badge or something that says, 50% off, like total clearance, like we're blowing this stuff out, and you want it to maybe move down or do something interesting on a particular slide, right? Well, then bind this to a certain one of those captions for that deal, right? So you can do all kinds of things, anything you want, really. That is awesome. If it's not working, maybe there's a So, for example, let's say I broke something here. Say I misspell this here, right? Let's see what happens. Bad things. Bad things are happening. So right click, inspect, and there you can see, sure enough, you see that little thing there? 4 errors, that's not good. 5, end climbing. Oh, hit on the console, right? And obviously there's something going on. So uncaught type error, whatever, .remove class is not a function, custom.js, line 32. So look at the first error here. Line 32, custom.js. Line 32, that's not line 32. Am I misreading that? No, that's line 12. Sorry, that's a projector. Custom.js line 12. And then custom.js line 12, sure enough, remove class is not a function. Use that console. The console is your friend. You know, if something's broken, it will at least point you in the right direction. It's a little obnoxious on mobile. It's still kind of fun. Right? Let's turn it sideways. Let's turn it to landscape on the Nexus 5X. There you go. It's pretty cool. Neat. So to recap, we build out the HTML, right? We have a div that contains the whole thing. The magic here is that it has a class called Carousel, right? There's another class called Slide, which does some other interesting things too. The data ride attribute, Carousel, include these because those are all tied to the component functionality. We have an ordered list for those indicators here. Make sure the targets, the data targets, are attached to the ID for the div itself. Each of these, we have a carousel inner which contains the slides. Each slide, in this case, I've used a figure with an image and a fig caption. You don't have to do that, right? And then the previous and next buttons are simply anchor elements with very specific classes attached to them, right? That's the magic. And then, of course, if we want to modify that, modify how it looks, we can attach a custom CSS, and we can modify it using those classes, right? And if we want to make any additional, add some additional functionality, there are all kinds of events, more so than we've seen here today, that you could tie other things to make it a very interesting experience. Pretty cool. Like if you think about, I spend a lot of time I tend to gab a lot. But if you think about how little code really we've put together here, we've got a lot of functionality that's mobile first, right? It looks good. It's really plain and simple in the sense that I could snap this into just about any look and feel on any web application. And I've got a lot of functionality baked right into it. I can make this fit and work anywhere. So yeah, you can build this from scratch, but I don't know. I'm not sure if in today's web application environment, we very often have the luxury of building things from scratch. I just don't think we do. You should, but it doesn't hurt you from time to time to actually try and build one of these things from scratch. Dig up a really cool tutorial on how to do this without the use of a library. It makes you appreciate even more what these libraries do for us, right? They do a lot of great stuff, and they make life a lot easier for us. Cool. All right. So it's 3:58.